People who grew up with strict parents. What's the dumbest rule you had to live with? Story 1. Rotating curfew types, so none of them were overused. Today is the homework curfew. No going out until it's all done and checked, extra time wasted. Oh, no homework today. Well, dinner is at 4 p.m. and you can't go out after dinner. And today is the darkness curfew, which is around 4 p.m., not sunset or actual darkness. Just when sunset is kinda starting, worse during winter months. And today is mom's workout class. You have to stay late at school or get taken along. And no, you can't be dropped at home even if it's on the way. And no, you can't go out if you take the bus and get home alone. You have to stay there because nobody else is home yet. What's that, no homework? Well, I've suddenly decided you need to read more. You're staying in. Yeah, mom was a super control freak for no reason. Story 2. We couldn't drink soda out of the can in public because only common people did that. I never understood it as a kid. I'm still not 100% sure why my mom had this rule even as an adult, but I think it's perhaps to do with people drinking alcohol outside. I asked her as an adult, and her response was, well, it is common looking, so I dunno. Story 3. My phone had to be downstairs and plugged in our kitchen. My parents had to know my password, and could read or open my phone at any time. I used to stay after school for an extra 15 to 20 minutes before headed home. In many cases, since I'd already gotten to see my friends, I wouldn't be able to hang out when they went to movies, a friend's house, etc. When I got a girlfriend, suddenly I wasn't to be trusted with anything. I had to go straight home and could no longer stay at friends' houses overnight. I was 18 and had my own car. I also got my phone taken away for several weeks after some of my friends sent inappropriate memes in a group chat. I had no part in it, but I got punished when I was 19, and living in dorms, I finally turned off tracking on my phone so my parents couldn't track my location. Not because I was doing anything bad, just because my mother had texted me the night before after I went to pick friends up from a club, and she demanded to know why I was there. The next day, while I was at work, my parents drove to my work location and confiscated my car for removing tracking. Story 4. I couldn't see the same person multiple times in a row. I had to hang out with a different friend before I could see them again. I still have zero idea what the logic there was. It was the rule for any friend I saw consistently. Story 5. When my dad got remarried, I was 17 and had to move. My stepmother had the stupidest rules. 1. Everyone had to sit in the same chair at the table, even if not during dinner time. She'd throw a tantrum if someone sat in a different chair. 2. No hanging out with friends on the weekends. 3. She would, and I kid you not, turn off the Wi-Fi for the entire day if at least one person decided not to go to church. 4. Couldn't walk through a bathroom to get into a part of the house that isn't as easily accessible otherwise. I wish I was joking when I say she guarded that bathroom one night. 5. Everyone has to go to bed at the exact same time, 9 o'clock p.m., because the youngest wouldn't be able to sleep if other people were awake. He was 11. Story 6. When I was 17, I went on a date with a 16-year-old girl who was new to my school. She had moved there from Northwest Arkansas. Her parents were really strict. When I showed up to our date, I was told that we'll be traveling in her parents' car. I had to sit in the front with her dad and she sat in the back with her mom. They talked to me about Jesus the entire ride to the Olive Garden. She left a handwritten note in my locker on Monday apologizing. No, we didn't end up together. Story 7. Not being allowed to study certain subjects because of my gender. My parents really never accepted the fact I study criminology. They still blabber about how I should be studying tourism management since it's more feminine. Story 8. I couldn't have a Walkman because it would make me antisocial. Then how come all the kids with lots of friends have them? Went over as well as you think it did. Story 9. No watching wrestling because it will make you gay. I've put a bike lock on the fridge. No midnight snacks for anyone. Read one book every day. If you cannot, you'll write sentences. I'm annoyed at the world. Get off the video games and go outside. No metal or classic rock because the devil will influence you. No trading cards because the devil created it. No UFC because it's too violent. Basically, my dad made the rules and they were outright pathetic as I reflect back on it. That was only because he was and everything he did was hypocritical. He told us never to smoke pot. Come a few years later we walk in and see him completely stoned, eating Smarties and watching. Good thing I was considered a rebel in his eyes because I would have hated being a tool. Edit holy. That's a lot of upvotes, thank you. Story 10. I wasn't allowed to see most of the TV series kids watch because they were violent, distracting, or a bad influence. Basically, when my friends talk about their childhood series or TV shows, the only thing I say is sounds interesting. Story 11. Just one. I can't choose. Senseless age restrictions for everything. No shaving your legs until you are 15, no matter how much you are bullied in PE for being hairy. No makeup till 16. No boys until 16, not even as friends. No phone calls between 4 and 6 p.m. No cartoons on Saturday mornings. You have to do all the housework every Saturday. No sitting down to rest after school. Chores and homework begin immediately, even if the school day was 11 hours long. As mine were in high school, you must get an after-school job at 16, even if you are trying to do all the extracurricular things that will get you college scholarships. No bananas because they are for your mom only. No friends in the house. No sleepovers or birthday parties. There was one exception when I was 7. If your friend's family invites you to anything, the answer is no. No special supplies for school projects. Make do without. No asking for lessons of any kind. You cannot go along on any of your Girl Scout troops trips or events. No going more than a 3-block radius away from the house, even at 15 years old, being grounded if you show that you are upset in the slightest. Not even yelling, just crying or having a sad face. No dating outside my race. Even though the one boy I cared for, a kind and respectful guy, was not my race, I ended up dating a white drug addict. Rules in my house were not based on love or logic, but control. Story 12 for me, strict parents was never about specific rules. It was just an overwhelming feeling of not doing anything unless explicitly allowed or told to. You never asked for permission, or for anything, just be quiet and take what you're given. Never do anything that might inconvenience the parents. Nothing after school because then they'd have to pick you up. Don't ask for something at the store. Don't ask for school supplies or clothes or money for standardized testing. Don't go anywhere they have to drive you. Obviously I never learned to drive, because they never taught me, and going anywhere at all was something you just kind of hoped someone else asked for. I never rolled down a window in a car ever. Sweltering 100-degree summer days, old cars without AC, and you just sit there hoping someone in the front has a window open so you can get some breeze. I also never wore a seatbelt. I remember wishing I could, but I didn't have permission. Not that I was explicitly forbidden, but just was never told to, and doing so without permission was unthinkable. You had no control over your food, snacks were not a thing, ever, you never just went to the fridge or made your own meals. There was a meal at 6 made by one of the kids, and that was your food. You have no option to not eat it. When I left home I moved in with someone over 6 inches taller than me, and it took me 2 months before I even conceived of the idea that I could move the shower head without getting in trouble. Story 13 I wasn't allowed to hang out with anyone whose parents smoked cigarettes because they thought I would start smoking them if I did. This was particularly problematic because we lived in a shitty part of town, so basically everyone smoked something, my parents included. Story 14 if it was the dumbest, but it was funny. I wasn't allowed to watch MTV or Comedy Central. My parents blocked the channels on our TV, but the channels were switched sound by the cable company, so they ended up blocking the History Channel and C-SPAN and didn't realize it. I watched MTV and Comedy Central whenever they weren't home. Story 15 a lot of us didn't have strict parents. We had abusive parents who liked to control the narrative by calling themselves strict. There is a big difference between being strict and abusive. Story 16 a friend of mine had a wacko mom from Mars. He was pre-med and mom was a doctor, and she insisted on reading his textbooks to him every night to study. He and I did a study session of our own over Skype, and she had secretly been listening to us talk through his bedroom door, because we were laughing too much. Internet went off at around 11 p.m. every night so that he wouldn't stay up texting friends. Story 17 we were not allowed outside after supper even in the summer. It would be light out and all the kids were outside playing and we'd be bathed in our jammies and not allowed back outside. Story 18 when I was a teenager my mom would ground me one day for every minute I was late. One time my alternator died on my POS Ford LTD and I was 30 minutes late. No excuses, grounded for a month. You should have tried starting your car earlier, and I had to save up to replace the alternator. Story 19 lived with my parents until I was 24. When I was an accountant like 7 years ago and during tax season, people work late. Even though I was 24 or so at that time, my parents gave a strict 9 p.m. curfew, no exceptions. I once forgot to tell my parents I'm going to be coming late because I was just slammed with work. They called me non-stop until I answered the phone. Around 11 p.m. or so, while I was still working, I then had the chance to look at my phone and had 100 missed calls and 90 texts. I eventually had to take a selfie with a specific request they made to confirm I was indeed in the office. Funny thing about this story is that they were both accountants and knew how hectic it could be. I moved out the next month. Story 20 Dad had a rule that he said all good Catholic children had to follow. We couldn't eat before church on Sunday. So we would get up then Mass would be at 10:30 am and would last an hour, home for about 12 midday and we were starving. Years later I found out there was no such rule. Story 21 I was only allowed one shower a week and it had to be fast, no flushing the toilet if it's only P tried to save money at any cost. I'm happy I can shower whenever I want to now. Story 22 if you're too sick to go to school, you're too sick to watch TV. If I don't know their parents, you're not allowed to go to their house. But they only knew 2 people's parents at my school, one of whom bullied me, didn't allow people to come to our house because they were hoarders, and then had the nerve to come in my room and harp on me for never going over to any of my friends' houses, and when I was your age, I was hardly ever home. You're not allowed to say no. While I wouldn't call this strict per se, it's a horrible rule to enforce on a young girl, or any child. Children should learn to say no or else they'll get themselves into bad situations when they're older. You have to be enrolled in a sport at all times. When I had asthma that literally made me collapse at times when exerting myself. My dad just told me I was weak, needed to get into better shape with sports, and refused to fill my script for an inhaler. You can't play with Legos because you're a girl. Oh yes, my dainty little fingers might bleed and building Lego towers may turn me into a lesbian. Story 23 my buddy spent half of his high school career grounded. He was ground over his birthday all 4 years of high school. I will admit he earned some of the groundings, but seriously, the amount of time he had no phone, computer, and could not be with friends on weekends was insane. I think every December to May during high school he was basically on home arrest. His grounding senior year resulted in losing privileges and he had to ride the bus with freshmen because no friends could pick him up either. He flunked out of college the next year as he was too wild with all the freedom. Story 24. You need to wash all the dishes when you make a late-night snack because no dishes left overnight. You're too loud when washing dishes at night. Stop doing that. You left dishes in the sink overnight. How dare you? You're not allowed to hang out with friends unless you have the date. Exact time slot. I've met their parents. I know the exact location and I need all this info a month ahead of time. Why don't you go out more? You're so boring for a 20-year-old. You need to ride your bike at this many miles per hour and you need to maintain that no matter the terrain. Oh, you threw up from the asthma attack from trying to keep up. You're weak and need to work out more. Now hand me the tracker I installed on your bike so I make sure you are actually following through. There are so many more. Edit. Forgot this goodie. I wasn't allowed to get fat even though I was forced to eat adult-sized meals. Looking a little chubby. Forced to ride my bike more or yard work without breaks. I was a 100 pounds until I was 20. Story 25. I just talked about this on the What Did You Find Out Later Was Bad Parenting thread, but they didn't let us interact with people outside our family, unless they were sufficiently religious and conservative, and of the specific type of religion and conservatism that they were. Few people were. This had the added effect that I didn't realize how much of their other practices were bad, or at least uncommon. Like, obviously I didn't like being regularly beaten for ill-defined reasons, but I never questioned if it was unusual for parents to beat their children because I rarely interacted with other children, or their parents for that matter. They started relaxing those ideological constraints in middle school, and again in high school. To continue with the example, middle school was where I started meeting kids who weren't afraid of their parents, and high school was when I was able to actually visit them at home a couple times, which meant I got to see how their parents treated them. Spoiler alert, it wasn't periodic beatings because they know what they did. Story 26. I wasn't allowed to travel without my dad, brother, or another shepherd accompanying me, female. Yay, I wasn't allowed to have my laptop in my room ever. My mom held passwords for every account I owned and would frequently check them into my early 20s. We weren't allowed to listen to rock music, which was anything with a heavier emphasis on the second and fourth beat, or really any music my mother found annoying at any given time. Turn off that rock right now. Weren't allowed to pierce our ears. Not because my parents were against it, but because my maternal grandparents frowned upon it, and my mom believes that we're supposed to obey our parents as much as possible even as adults. When I moved out at 23, it was labeled running away and created a great deal of hubbub in my family, and with our church leadership due to the narrative, I wasn't allowed to date. I got married at 25. Mind you, outside a blessing, and there are members of my extended family who refuse to visit or keep in contact with my husband or myself as a result of this day. The list goes on, but it'll stop there. Story 27. I'm not allowed to spend any money I worked for unless I have a job. That isn't a bad rule, aside from the fact that I can't buy a 2-bottle of chocolate milk from a gas station without my mom getting all upset that I'm literally gonna spend all $35K in my bank account. Also, I'm a full-time student, so it's not like I'm doing nothing. However, I know the real reason is that my control-freak mom can't bear the thought of her kids having a better home life than she does while they're living with her. I have long since started having Amazon packages delivered to a drop-off point for when I go to school, and I use cash to add to my Amazon gift card balance that I get from doing cashback when I use my debit card to pay for gas, so my dad, who has access to my account, doesn't see anything other than money being spent on gas. Moral of the story to you parents: strict parents raise sneaky kids who are good at lying. All there is to it. Story 28. After not giving a single about my education for my entire life, my dad one day wakes up, realizes I'm nearly done with high school, he didn't even know what grade I'm in exactly, and decides he needs to tell me what to apply for. Insisted I apply for veterinary medicine and not engineering as I'd planned, because only way a woman can make it in engineering is by being a like. Yes dad, thanks for reminding me the sciences are full of people like you. Story 29. Not allowed to listen to music while cleaning the house because it would distract us. No seeing anyone except family on Sundays because that's family day, even though we did absolutely nothing together as a family. It didn't even matter if it was my friend's birthday. If it was a Sunday, I was forbidden from seeing her. I just remembered that this insanity even continued when I moved out for 6 months to live with friends. Every Sunday I went to my parents' house and spent the day there. WTF. Story 30. My dad used to beat the out of me. He once beat me awake while I was sleeping. My mom used to mentally abuse me for hours on end, sitting on a bar stool for 8-hour stints. There weren't many rules actually, just abuse. I used to go to church alone on Sundays just to get away. 30 years later the memory still stings. Mother's Day angers me. Story 31. No chewing gum. I didn't realize that was weird until we visited a distant family friend, and the first thing their kid asked is if my mother still wouldn't let us have gum. Story 32. 1. If you eat too much you will be fat and no one will want to be your friend. I was 57 and 160 pounds. 2. You can't wear jelly shoes. They will suffocate your feet. This was the 80s. 3. If you wear overalls both shoulder straps must be buckled or people will think that you are promiscuous. This was the early 90s. Folks would wear one strap unbuckled. For you can't wear blue jeans to school every day. You must have different colored pants because people will think that you only have one pair of pants. And they will think you are dirty again. 90s. There was a brief time when different colored jeans were in style. I hated them and was forced to wear them. Story 33. You know, my parents allowed me to run pretty feral. After we got our licenses, my mom was content to let my brother and I roam around at night to our heart's content. but my mom also interfered with all of my friendships and even went as far as to start homeschooling me in high school because she accused me of falling in with a bad crowd even though we literally didn't do anything. We were all edgy early Audi losers who liked Hot Topic and didn't go anywhere after school because we were lazy. I didn't even have my first drink until I was 30. The handful of rough kids I knew didn't want me to end up like them. Story 34. I wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend until I was 16. At 16, I wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend until I have a car. At 18, I wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend until I had a house, like LMAO. Story 35. No one was allowed to come over. It really sucked. Nothing magical, no Harry Potter, no Halloween, no rock or modern music, no modern movies or shows, had to watch classical films or children's cartoons until I was an adult, had to share a room with my parents for like 8 years. Story 36. Getting into an argument with my dad about curfew. I wanted to be home at 10:30. He was dead set on arguing with me because he wanted me to be home at 10:30. There are no typos there. My parents also wouldn't let me go to prom with my very nice and respectable girlfriend because she wasn't the same religion, so instead I hung with some guys that I was friends with from church that night instead. They stole my car and I got in trouble at church because as they were driving away, I was yelling "Get the put of my car," and one of the guys' mom didn't like me using that type of language around her son. Story 37. If I wanted a girlfriend, my parents would have to approve of her background, looks, parents, housing, grades and height. Yes, height. Best part was that if they approved of a girl by luck, then I'm not allowed to invite her over. Not because I'd do something crazy but because I'd get too attached. Yeah, I was single. Story 38. I am 19F. For context, I to this day cannot visit someone else's house like a friend's house because I could get raped, killed. I cannot stay out later than 8 p.m. No alcohol, no drinking, no nothing. I have never been to a party for that reason, and OFC the curfew. Always have to tell them when, where and with who I am going and why so long and why with they person, etc. Even if I just want to grab some food real quick someone, I cannot go to a faraway city, as I could get raped, killed, and usually leads to my father making bullshit excuses as to why I cannot go. One instance, I couldn't go to a city 40 minutes away alone, because there are prostitutes there and they would influence me negatively. I just wanted to see the Spider-Man movie, but okay. Just in general, always demotivated from leaving the house at all. Anytime I hang out more than once a week the complaining starts. Absolutely no dating or interest in boys. I cannot hang out with men or talk with them. Throy text mom has it worse as she is forbidden from speaking to men, like male workers for example. Maybe even weirder, she cannot hold onto objects for a long time that are kind of phallic, like a cucumber, as it could imply STH to the men there. Yeah, either, clothes have to be modest. I cannot wear shorts in summer for sports. I wear wide, long basketball shorts for my brother, and even those I am discouraged from wearing. If I am alone with my father at home, he scolds me from wearing these revealing clothes, despite the fact I am in the house. I am not allowed to walk through my town alone, because I could get kidnapped, raped as it is quite remote. I cannot work as it is not a woman thing to do. Usually when asking if I can work as a teenager context, I live in Germany in a small town. I am finally able to leave once I start studying, as the only pro is that my entire schooling will be financed, meaning it is my way out. Really odd exception, as then I am allowed to move as far as I want. Story 39. Dad had OCD, so every time we left the house we would have to wait by the door, and not make a sound so he could check every door and window to make sure it was locked along with every room and closet to make sure no one was hiding in the house. Story 40. No watching Harry Potter because the Pope said he was not sure about it, and as Catholics we follow the Pope's guidance, but then the Pope watched it and said it was fine. Still not allowed to watch Harry Potter and I'm 28, it's just a pride thing at this point. Story 41. Not me, but a friend of my sister's, around 1966, her mother would not allow her to wear slacks that zipped up the front, only on the side, don't ask me why. Story 42. Not me, but my parents' friends told their daughter that she was not allowed to go to prom unless she had been accepted to Stanford. At that point she had already gotten into Berkeley. She did end up going to Stanford and now she barely talks to her parents. Obviously it wasn't only because of this, but I'm sure you can imagine how unreasonable her parents were. They also heavily favored their younger son. Story 43. I couldn't watch the TV show Laverne and Shirley because it was unwholesome. Really, two grown women without husbands living alone together. Oh my stars and garters. Mom actually used the word unseemly and I had to go look it up. Story 44. My stepfather wouldn't let me work because earning my own money could make me want to drop out of school. If I wanted to go out, I had to wait for him to come home from work. Permits to go out had to be requested days in advance. If I asked permission the same day, it was a definitive no. Story 45. I wasn't allowed to go out with friends, like at all at first. It resulted in the obvious. Kids had fun without me and I was left out. I was allowed to bring friends over but we had to be quiet. I wasn't allowed to go to their homes. Also no sleepovers until I was like 13, and that was only because it was at grandma's in a village and the friend lived literally in the next house. Yet I kept being checked on and had to come home first thing in the morning. I also wasn't allowed to sleep in the tent that was in our garden, with fence and everything, right under the window. My dad used to hit me when I made crumbs anywhere, or when I asked a stupid question. Oh, and I wasn't allowed to talk in the car, or just make any sound whatsoever, so Game Boy only on mute etc. That was probably the most ridiculous one. Also parents didn't let me go on summer camps because that's where kids get their first intimate experience and I wasn't allowed that. It got a bit better in high school and I could finally do whatever I wanted when I moved out for college. Edit. I remembered another one. Until I was 7 I wasn't allowed to grow my hair over my ears. No idea why. In the back it was okay, so I had long hair in the back and short in the front. They always cut it that way and I used to be so unhappy because I wanted to be a princess and instead I looked like an Eastern European gangster. Story 46. Everyone else in the family had to accommodate to whatever my brother wanted. If he wanted to watch movie A and we wanted movie B, we'd end up picking movie A. If he wanted burgers but we wanted pizza, we'd pick burgers. Sometimes this was at the expense of my sisters and his privileges. I was in college when I realized not everyone changes to accommodate family members or friends. No, my brother is not the youngest, nor does he have a serious medical condition. Okay, so my parents weren't necessarily strict, they just came from a culture and were not used to the American ways. But in my defense, that was a dumb rule. Story 47. I wasn't allowed to listen to any music except gospel. Only certain TV shows but off by 9 am. 5-minute phone calls only. Could not attend dances or watch movies. Could only talk to boys from my church. Well, it didn't work out. Left home at 16, married at 17. No, I was not pregnant and moved 6 hours away. Story 48. As the oldest child. No sleepovers with friends, however. My 2 younger siblings were both allowed sleepovers. Jokes on my parents now since I moved out at 21 and siblings 30 and 35 both still live at home without paying helping out. Story 49. I had to hide deodorant and scented body lotions or else they'd be confiscated. I also wasn't allowed to make tea with tea bags or use coffee creamer. After moving out, I still feel somehow that I can leave my deodorant out on the bathroom counter and buy tea bags at the store. Story 50. I can't ask to go over to anyone else's house because it's rude to invite yourself over. I can't go over to someone else's house if they invite me because mom never believed it. I cannot invite anyone else over to my house because it's rude. Story 51. I had to put my phone in my mom's room every night so she could look through my phone to see if I was following my religion. I am atheist but raised more men. Story 52. I was 13 or 14 and got grounded for the entire summer vacation because I got an 84 in one of my classes, when all my grades were supposed to be 85 and above. Story 53. The dumbest one. Never close the door to your room. Other dumb rules. 1. Tell us about every game you play, cause it could be illegal. 2. No friends at our house. 3. Don't throw away food. I don't think that is dumb rule, but some people find it dumb. Story 54. We must eat healthy. I know the title sounds silly, but hear me out. Born and raised in the South unfortunately. Dad 66 white, found mom 64 native in the North when they were young, had a couple kids, they had 3 more including me after years of being in the South. My mother had always made balanced and nutritious meals. Dad would throw tantrums about having veggies other than corn or potatoes, and would borderline get violent if they weren't saturated with salt. Over time, it became meat and potatoes or unhealthily salted sauced. Same POS. Dad started telling my twin sister and I that we needed to start dieting when we were 6 years old because our stomachs poked out a little when we wore out bathing suits to the beach. He would take us to the convenience store or grocery store and tell us we could have whatever we wanted. However, whenever we were to be punished, our snacks goodies were the first to go. We were also subsequently shamed for being little pigs when we asked for more snacks when they were all gone. Also, whenever we picked actually healthy foods like fruits or veggies as snacks, he would tell us we liked eating bee spit honey or cocoons, green beans, snap peas, etc. He would do this while acting out the gross thing we wanted to eat, like spitting on the ground or wall when he said we wanted to eat bee spit, or show us a dead moth beetle when we ate green beans cocoons and tell us that's what would be in our stomachs if we ate them. So yeah, we could have whatever we wanted, but we would be called pigs for eating junk, or traumatize us when we ate healthily. Story 55. I wasn't allowed to watch sports on TV. My dad didn't like sports so nobody else was allowed to. Basically pursuing anything I liked was banned. People were only allowed to do things he liked, no matter how harmless. The weird thing was, he made no effort to get anyone else to like his interests. He was a. Story 56. Generally speaking, I didn't have the strictest parents in the world. Most rules I had were meant to protect me, which I completely understand. The one rule, however, that I did not understand whatsoever was what I was allowed to watch on TV. I was never allowed to watch SpongeBob, and the only show on Cartoon Network I was allowed to watch was Tom and Jerry. Don't get me wrong, it's a great show, but I will never understand why I couldn't watch SpongeBob. Story 57. Don't invite yourself over to places. Every time I'd asked to hang out with a friend I would be asked, are you inviting yourself over to hang out or did they invite you? I was the shyest kid so I never invited myself over anywhere. Somehow mom would just know sometimes I was inviting myself over so I couldn't hang out. Real dumb rule. Story 58. They keep yelling at me for not accomplishing anything, but they won't let me pursue the hobbies I like, only what they like. I love engineering, but they wouldn't even get, but they'll spend thousands in music, if I just mention music. Story 59. I couldn't leave to hang out with friends unless my siblings completed whatever chore my parents assigned. I was also not allowed to do said chore so that I could go. My friends and I awkwardly stood in the kitchen once waiting for my sister to do the dishes. Story 60. We lived in a shoebox in the middle of the road. Every morning we'd wake up at 10 o'clock at night, half an hour before we went to bed. We'd lick the road clean with our tongues for a spoonful of gruel, then we'd get home and Dad would kill us with a broken bottle and dance around on our graves. Story 61. There was a card game, Magic the Gathering, that my parents thought was satanic so they forbid me from playing it. That was in the 90s, pretty get up rule if I might say. Story 62. I don't know if this is a dumb rule. It's good but was taken too seriously. My mom was really big about being a good hostess and entertaining guests. All fine and dandy until my little 10-year-old self has to entertain my little nephews and say yes to basically anything. One was a notorious klepto, and when I would get mad and refuse to let him be in my room, my mom would obviously overrule me and say she'll keep an eye on him before he leaves. Took 3 years for her to finally start believing me when she caught him sneaking in my room and stuffing my Lego characters in his pocket. We went to his house and found some prized Pokemon cards I owned. They were too old for him to have bought them, hidden in his socks in a drawer. I know there was a lot more stolen, but I'll obviously never get any of it back. Safe to say, when I teach my kids about hosting for family, they will always be able to tell other kids to not be in their room. Story 63. Didn't grow up with strict parents per se, but I went to a boarding school for 5 years with an at-times stupid rule system. Every student had to complete 5 hours of physical activity a week, on top of managing their daily chores, responsibilities, homework, extracurriculars, etc. If we failed, we'd get the equivalent of an at-home detention, so more chores, less free time, earlier bedtime, meaning a tighter schedule overall, but still we would be required to get 5 hours of physical activity. All of that to say, one time I got my privileges taken away for a month total because one week I only got 4 hours, and couldn't get the required exercise after getting in trouble, so I was caught in a dumb cycle.